As our roundtable takes their seats, listen to more from the Supreme Court at that historic hearing on health care.
Everybody has to buy food sooner or later, so you define the market as food. Therefore, everybody's in the market. Therefore, you can make people buy broccoli.
The rest of us end up paying because people are getting cost-free health care. And the only way to prevent that is to have them pay sooner rather than later, pay up front.
Here the government is saying that the federal government has a duty to tell the individual citizen that it must act. That changes the relationship of the federal government to the individual in a very fundamental way.
Everyone in place now. I'm joined, as always, by George Will, former White House advisor, Van Jones, Green Jobs advisor, also the author of a new book called Rebuild the Dream, conservative columnist and best-selling author Ann Coulter. That's what you're aspiring to, Van Jones. Matt Bai of the New York Times. You've got a fascinating cover story in the New York Times Magazine this week called Who Killed the Debt Deal? Excellent and exhaustive. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And our Supreme Court expert, Terry Moran. Thank you all for being here. Let's begin with the Supreme Court. George Will, boy, the CW last week was that, from the Supreme Court watchers, was the court was prepared to uphold this. But that barrage of tough questions, I think, surprised a lot of people. How do you think it came out at the end of the day?
Well, 5 minutes into the important argument on the mandate on day 2, it was clear that the justices, at least 5 of them, had decided that the narrative advanced by the critics of Obamacare was valid. That is, that this raises fundamental questions about whether there is a limiting principle on what the federal government can do, or is the Commerce Clause so infinitely elastic that Congress can do pretty much anything at once, and the federal government has plenary police powers. So it's a regime-level question. And it was clear early on that 5 justices think that's a serious question, which takes us back to Nancy Pelosi. During the debate over this, she was once asked, are there constitutional problems here? And she said, I think completely ingenuously, are you serious? Are you serious? She's lived her life in San Francisco in the Democratic Party. The idea of limited government is foreign to her as outer Mongolia. So in a sense, what we've now done is established that what the justices are doing as they write this opinion is taking seriously what she did not take seriously.
Well, first of all, it's so amazing to hear the Republican Party now cheerleading for the freeloaders. They say, hey, listen, if you dive bomb yourself into an emergency room, don't worry about it. Taxpayers will pay for it. We have there's nothing we can do to make sure that people pay on the front end. Now, listen, you had people on the left who were saying the whole time, let's go with Medicare for everybody. They said, no, that's too much government. So we said, fine, we'll go with individual responsibility. You're an American, you need to take responsibility for your individual health care. And now that doesn't work. What does that mean? That means we're going to be going back to a system where right now...
So it sounds like you believe the Supreme Court's going to strike this down.
No. Actually, I think that they are asking tough questions because tough questions are appropriate. But what I don't understand is, what does the Republican Party want here? If we can't have single payer, we can't have a public option, and we can't have individual responsibility, what we're going to have here is more Americans dying.
I want to get to that question in a second, but first let me go back to you, Terry, because the Supreme Justices have probably already had a first vote.
Friday is when they met for the first time and voted, and while Justice Kennedy has in the past switched, then others have...
It is all up to him?
Yes, it's his case right now, clearly from the kind of questions that George was talking about. And it was a thrill to be in there, but there was one big thing missing in the Supreme Court this week that most big cases have. A real-world example of how the law is really operating on a real human being. It hasn't even really taken effect yet. And most of the time in our history, that causes courts to say, wait a minute, we don't give advisory opinions, we let it go to work. This is an activist court. Just as the courts of the left of the 1950s and 60s were, we've now had half a century of judicial supremacy, first of the left, now of the right. They will do this.
And if it turns out that Anthony Kennedy decides he can find a way to vote for this, what do you think Chief Justice Roberts does? Does he allow this to be a 5-4 decision, or do you think he joins the majority and tries to craft a narrower opinion upholding the law?
That's an interesting question. I don't think he is like Chief Justice Berger. I think he will not write a silly opinion just to be in the majority. So, no, I think all of the justices will write what they really believe, and who knows how it'll come out. I think it is true that 8 of the justices could have taken the week off and just let Justice Kennedy hear the case. I don't know, because you can't tell that much from an oral argument, and I've made that mistake in the past, so I'm not inclined to do it again. But, I mean, if I could say, as for the freeloader problem, that's a freeloader problem created by Congress. So you can't bootstrap your way into a Commerce Clause power by saying, well, we're going to require every emergency room in the country to treat all comers, including illegal aliens with the sniffles, and then say, and we're going to take care of paying for it from the federal government, and that gives us the Commerce Clause.
It's an American value that
because
we don't let
who
people
dealt
die.
with the freeloader problem is my candidate for president, Mitt Romney. A state can have an individual mandate. The question is, does Congress have the constitutional authority to require some guy sitting at home minding his own business to purchase a product?
That does bring us to the politics of all this. Let me bring this to you, Matt. By a lot of debate on if this goes down. Let's assume that for just a second, how big a blow this is to President Obama, or is it in some way liberating to him going into the general election?
You know, for reasons Terry was just talking about, I think it's kind of a political loser either way, the president in a sense, because the history of big social legislation like this is that there is this period before it kicks in, before people get used to the benefits, where there's a lot of anxiety. Government's doing something big, it's expensive. And then the benefits kick in and people start to build their life decisions around it, and suddenly it's an entitlement and you can just never change it, even if you should. We're still in that interregnum period here. And I think there's a lot of anxiety in the public, but there's not a sense of all the good things that could come. Some have kicked in, but the exchanges don't go up until 2014. People aren't really aware of what the law does in a lot of cases. So I think for the president to be relitigating this, either legally or politically, is actually not especially helpful for him politically.
It cannot be a good thing going into the fall campaign for the most prestigious federal institution, the Supreme Court, to announce not only that the president's plan was unconstitutional, but that it struck at the very fundamentals of the Madisonian architecture of limited government. That can't be a plus to a campaign. This will be, I think, either way, a 5-4 decision. Unlike, say, Brown Board of Education.
So you don't buy the argument that Roberts might try to go in the majority?
I think Roberts will be in the majority, and I think he'll write the opinion. I assume that will be the case. But if this isn't, it was terribly important in Brown versus Board of Education to have a unanimous court because you were overturning the mores of a region and changing the thinking of society. This would overturn an unpopular law.
But 5-4, it'll be all Republicans against all Democrats if the law goes down, just like it was in Citizens United, just like it was in Bush versus Gore. And the risk for the court is that it begins to be seen by a lot of people as just another bunch of political hacks up there who vote their partisan interests. And that hurts the long-term interest of the court.
There is no measurable evidence that Bush v. Gore, a much more consequential decision, had any effect on the prestige of the court.
Let me say something here. People say, is this going to be bad for Obama, good for Obama? You know something? Obama has health care. No matter what happens, he has health care. We got 40 million Americans who don't. You say this is an advisory opinion. It's not. There are 2.5 million young people right now who have health insurance that wouldn't. There are 45 million... If it all goes down, there are 45 million American women right now who are getting mammograms and other support who would lose that if it all goes down. This is not advisory. Right now, people are benefiting. Seniors right now who are watching have saved, 5 million of them have saved $3 billion right now. So you're talking about taking that away from the American people. Why? So that we have this sort of political point scoring on an ideology that's the conservative ideology that says individuals should take responsibility. And we're going to do it anyway.
No, I mean, the whole problem with, it's not health insurance that's the problem. It is medical care that is the problem. And the problems with medical care are 100% created by the federal government. You have the federal government already paying for more than almost 50% of all medical care costs in the country. What you need is a free market in medical care. And I think Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan will know how to effect that.